It's draft season, and we already touched on the wings, the shooting guards, the small forwards that the Memphis Grizzlies could target in the 2022 NBA draft. But now it's time to go to arguably the most important position of them all, the floor general, the point guard. There are a lot of good point guards in this draft, and the Grizzlies can get their hands on them. So let's talk about it coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole. We appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies each and every day. And we're big on the draft talk right now. So you saw we did the Kennedy Chandler profile with my partner, Sean Coleman. On the last episode, I talked about the wings, Wendell Moore and Jordan Hall and three other guys that you can go back. If you missed it, go back and check that out. Well, my name is Damichael Cole again. You can follow me on Twitter at Damichael C. I'm the beat writer for the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee, where you can also follow some of my written work and some of the profile work that I'm doing there as well, leading up to the NBA draft. So point guard, it's the floor general. It's arguably the most important position on the floor. You look at all the great teams in the NBA, not all of them, but most of them have elite point guard play. It's essential. It's essential to the way the game is played these days. And you need multiple ball handlers in some way as well. So that's the thing about this team. The Grizzlies have their guy. They have Ja Morant. And we saw what the Grizzlies could do with Ja Morant. But here's another thing. Last season, they also had Tyus Jones. Well, I keep saying last season. It's because it's last season for the Grizzlies. This season is technically going on. So I say this season. This season, the Grizzlies had Tyus Jones too. And did that come in handy or what? Ja Morant missed a lot of time. Tyus Jones stepped up, basically another starter. I don't even want to call him a step-in replacement or anything like that, the way he played. He stepped up. The Grizzlies played well. They played a little bit differently. And, they were still a team more than good, more than capable of doing really good things. They beat the Golden State Warriors team in the finals by 39 points in the playoffs in a game that Tyus Jones started. But Tyus Jones is a free agent. So it brings up the question, what will the Grizzlies do? There is a hole that has to be addressed there. And I've talked about it in terms of there are some free agent options out there. Dennis Schroeder, Ricky Rubio, Rajon Rondo, DeLon Wright. The list goes on. There are some very good options out there. And some of those guys I just named, they have a lot of starting experience. Dennis Schroeder, Ricky Rubio, Rajon Rondo. Those are guys who have a lot of starting experience in the NBA. The Grizzlies could address that position in free agency. Won't have to pay those guys that much money. Ricky Rubio is going to be coming off of a torn ACL. Dennis Schroeder, had an up and down situation, got traded to Houston and with a rebuilding team and just didn't look like he fit in there. DeLon Wright played behind Trae Young in Atlanta. So there's that. You won't have to pay those guys that much. So there's the potential for that position to be addressed there. But I've also made the argument that even if the Grizzlies address the point guard position through free agency, they still should draft another point guard. Let me tell you why. Let's take this season as an example. When Ja Morant got hurt, the Grizzlies only had Tyus Jones as just a primary point guard. So what happened after that? You had guys like John Conchar, Desmond Bane, and DeAnthony Melton running point guard. All, had good moments, especially Desmond Bane. I talked about it a lot during the playoffs, and just during the latter part of the season how Desmond Bane stepped up into that secondary playmaker role as the backup point guard and kind of kept that bench unit afloat. But he's not a primary guy. So when those guys were ball handlers, you did not see a lot of pick and roll. It was a lot of passing the ball and movement, which is good because NBA teams just don't do that much of that anymore. And, but also the downside of that was when the shot clock got down to 10 seconds, everyone's looking around. Who's going to make a play? There wasn't anyone. And that's why the Grizzlies' half-court offense kind of struggled at times, especially when you didn't have Ja Morant out there or Tyus Jones to dissect the pick and roll and create opportunities for teammates. So if the Grizzlies were to get a point guard in free agency, they should still grab one through the NBA draft. So just like we did on the Wings episode, we're going to do the same thing with the point guard position. And we're going to address one point guard who they may have to trade up for, a couple guys who should fall in their window in that 22 and 29 pick range where the Grizzlies are picking the first round. And maybe there's a guy or two that can be available when the Grizzlies are picking in the second round at 47. So we're going to start off with the guy they may have to trade up to get, and that's TyTy Washington from Kentucky. So here's my thing about TyTy Washington. This is another guy who I saw, as you'll hear me saying this a lot as we get through a lot of these one and done prospects. This is another guy I saw at the Allen Iverson Classic. Saw him over a 2-day period. Saw him win the 3-point shootout there, and saw him, quite frankly, just shoot the lights out of the ball in the game. From that moment on, you knew about the shooting. It was always with TyTy Washington about what else is going to be there for him. He, I think, is an excellent balance to what Ja Morant brings to the table in terms of you kind of keep that scoring guard mentality going, and they don't have to switch up as much as they did. Now, it worked out with Tyus Jones. We saw the Grizzlies passing the ball more. They were a better assist team with Tyus Jones and all of those things. But let's be honest, it's not a lot of Tyus Jones out there just growing on trees that can lead the NBA in assist-to-turnover ratio 4 seasons in a row. That's a Tyus Jones trait. So TyTy Washington, it starts with shooting the basketball. This guy has limitless range. He's one of those type of players. At Kentucky, averaged 45% shooting on 2-pointers as well. That's important. No, 49%, excuse me. 49.6% on 2-pointers. Shown the ability to get to the rim, to get around the rack, to finish. He has a floater as well. I like his floater. He shot 45% from the field. He also shot 35% from 3-point range on 3 attempts per game. That impressed me. Let me tell you why. Because when I saw him at the Allen Iverson Classic, it was just a lot of 3-pointers, and you wondered, this guy's a 5-star recruit, one of the best players in the country. Where's the inside game? That's not going to work. Well, at Kentucky, took 11 shots a game. Only 3 of them were 3-pointers. He showed the floater. He showed the ability to finish around the rim. Not a super explosive athlete by any means, but TyTy Washington is a guy who I'm high on. And just looking at most mock drafts, you see him going in that 15 to 20 range. So right out of the reach of the Grizzlies. So when we talked about the wings, we talked about guys that the Grizzlies would possibly have to package multiple first-round picks and, really move some pieces around to move up for. With TyTy Washington, they don't have to move as much, I don't think, especially if it goes how we're expecting this to go. If he's drafted in that 15, 16, 17, 18 range, the Grizzlies are at 22. You could possibly package 22 and 29, or you could possibly package 22 and 47 and throw in some cash incentive or things like that, and you're done. The Grizzlies should be able to do that, and that's why I like, TyTy Washington as a potential trade-up guy. And here's my thing about point guards. Point guard, it's the most important position, but it's also the hardest position. You see a lot of freshmen coming to college. They're just weren't. You look over the course of history, there haven't been a lot of John Walls, Derrick Rose, those type guys who come in from day one and they just, wow the world. We saw with Ja Morant had a very decent, freshman year at Murray State, but it was his sophomore year that supplanted him, made him one of the best players in college basketball and the number 2 pick in the NBA draft. So the thing about TyTy Washington is, he's quick. He has a great handle. He's a scorer. More than anything, how he fits the Grizzlies is he pushes the ball. That's a Kentucky thing. Kentucky under John Calipari, John Wall, Eric Bledsoe, all the other guards that have come out of there over time, they really emphasize pushing the pace. Tyrese Maxey, Emmanuel Quickly, the list goes on. Pushing the pace, and that's Taylor Jenkins. I mean, Locked On Grizzlies viewers, you've heard me talk about this. You've heard Sean talk about this as well. Pushing the pace is the Grizzlies thing. They led the league in transition points this year. That's why, the half court thing isn't their strength, because they're getting out in transition and they're pushing the ball constantly. TyTy Washington is a guy who can fit into that style. And we talk about the instincts on offense. He also has some defensive instincts as well. He's only about 6'3", doesn't have the longest arms. So I like his, instinctiveness on defense, but again, he's going to be a rookie. I compare it to like Zaire Williams as a rookie. Zaire Williams, you saw some of the instincts there. You saw some matchups, him guarding Luka, him guarding, Steph Curry, but you also saw times where he was guarding D'Angelo Russell and he'd get taken out of the game and things like that. So it's a very intriguing situation that the Grizzlies will be stepping into with that pick. TyTy Washington is a guy I like. I think he is a target. If the Grizzlies say, hey, we want to trade up, we feel like point guard is this important, look no further than TyTy Washington. All right, there's your trade up guy. So next up, we're going to talk about 2 guys. One of these guys you're very familiar with. We talked about him a lot on here. We're going to talk about 2 guys who the Grizzlies could possibly find within their range. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about Rock Auto, because look, I know a lot of you're out there, you're paying 30, 40, possibly even 100% more for the same parts in these chain stores that you can get for cheaper with Rock Auto. I'm giving you the blueprint to cheaper prices with Rock Auto, cheaper than these chain spots, cheaper than these car dealerships, and more than anything, they're affordable, but they're good parts as well. And we're talking about all type of parts: brakes, tail lamps, motor oils, even something like a new carpet. Whatever you want, Rock Auto has you covered. So this is all you have to do. Just go to rockauto.com right now, see what parts they have for your needs, right? Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us section. So, and they're known for this. I mean, amazingly, reliably low prices. All the parts you'll ever need, go to rockauto.com. The NBA season is coming down to a close. So you know what that means? That means, we're already talking about it on Locked On Grizzlies, but everyone's about to be talking about it, is the NBA draft, June 23rd. So that means you need to figure out, where do I go to get my mock draft? Well, let me tell you this. Locked On is going to have an exclusive mock draft. The ultimate NBA mock draft starts June the 16th with over 50 insiders. Nothing equals the ultimate NBA mock draft. The Locked On NBA Big Board draft experts, plus the Odyssey insiders. That includes me. First pick is June 16th. So all you have to do is search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. Again, search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and you just follow now. You don't miss a pick. Starting June 16th, the NBA Locked On will do their own mock draft. I think it's going to be fun. Locked On Grizzlies viewers, you should have an idea by now who, me and Sean Coleman like as potential Grizzlies players. We talked about it. Here are a couple more guys that we like too. Sean did the profile on Kennedy Chandler. I said Kennedy. Kennedy Chandler. Kennedy Chandler is a Memphis guy, born and raised here. We've talked about all the good he brings to the game, the instinctiveness, the elite athleticism with the 40-plus inch vertical, the ability to shoot the basketball, slower release, but made a high percentage of his three-pointers, the passing ability, high-rated point guard out of high school, played high-level basketball in the SEC. So here's the thing. I've written about Kennedy Chandler. I've talked about Kennedy Chandler. And there's something I want to focus on when it comes to Kennedy Chandler in particular, because people have said to me, and I've heard this on multiple occasions now, that Kennedy Chandler, he's too small. Kennedy Chandler is too small. So that's all I want to address here because we have past episodes. If you haven't seen the past episode where we discussed Kennedy Chandler as an option, go check that out. Sean Coleman was all over it. But here's the thing about Kennedy Chandler. Yes, he's on the smallest side. 6'1", 170 pounds. I get it. But we just talked about it. He has elite monies. 40-plus inch vertical at his size. For one, that stands out to me more than anything. Because you know what that means? Even in situations where, he's driving to the rim, because that's where it comes into play, right? He has to have a floater, which he does have, by the way, a la some of the guys that the Grizzlies have had on their team. But I want to we're going to localize this with the Locked On Grizzlies viewers. Because there's a Grizzlies player, Tyus Jones, coming out. You know what his size was? 6'1", 190. Kennedy Chandler is about 20 pounds less than he was in college at about 170. But you know what Ja Morant weighed coming out? About $175. And he's not much bigger now. Kennedy Chandler is going to be around 6'1", 170, 6 feet. But the instincts, the athleticism, you're not drafting him to be your primary number one point guard. Ja Morant is that. Let's be clear about this, because that's the thing when we talk about addressing the point guard position with the Grizzlies. Ja Morant is the guy. Point blank, period. We're not discussing anything about a potential, Ja replacement or anything. This is depth in the Grizzlies, as we saw last season. You're going to need it if Ja Morant misses a few games, if whoever the backup point guard that they address in free agency misses a few games, if this point guard they draft potentially misses a few games. You're gonna need the depth throughout the season. We saw that. Kennedy Chandler, I think, is a good change of pace guy. He pushes the pace. He can get out in transition. He finishes around the rim amid his size. He's shown that all throughout his career. That's all I have to say about Kennedy Chandler. We've done a profile on him. This guy is a gamer. Go look at the Tennessee highlights. Go look at his highlights at Briarcrest in high school, at Sunrise Christian when he went to the prep school. Kennedy Chandler is like that. I think he's a really good player. He's projected to go in that 18 to 25 range, so he could possibly be a trade-up guy too. But I think he could fall right into the Grizzlies' laps, and there could be an opportunity for the Grizzlies to say they'll take Kennedy Chandler. So Kennedy is a smaller point guard. Now we're going to talk about a guy a little bit on the bigger side where you talk about position versatility, like I talked about with the wings when we talked about that episode. That episode was about versatility, guys who can play multiple positions. Here's a point guard who you can actually put on the court with Ja Morant, and that's Andrew Nembhard. Andrew Nembhard played at Florida, played at Gonzaga. Numbers look the same. He's steady Eddie. He's consistent. He's 6'5", 190-pound guy. He was SEC All-Freshman. He was the sixth man of the year his first year at Gonzaga. But he was also two-time All-WCC at Gonzaga in the 2 seasons he played there. The guy is a gamer. Let me go through his numbers each year. Freshman year, started at Florida. 8 points a game, 5.4 assists. Next year starts at Florida, 11.2 points per game, 5.6 assists. First year, coming off the bench half of the season with Gonzaga, by the way. 9.2 points, 4.4 assists. Gonzaga gave him the keys this past season, 11.8 points, 5.8 assists. As you see, 3 seasons, over 5 assists per game. Do I need to say much more? Okay, I will. What about three-point shooting? That's big around here. Three-point shooting was a question for Andrew Nembhard throughout his career. I think as a senior at Gonzaga this past season, had his best three-point shooting season, and this is why he's being talked about as a late first-round pick. This is a guy, he should be there more than likely at 22. We're talking about him potentially being there at 29. for the Grizzlies pick. Say the Grizzlies go a different route with the 22nd pick and hope that there's a point guard there at 29. He should be there. And here's the thing about Andrew Nembhard. 1.6 three-pointers made as a senior after making no more than 1 3-pointer per game throughout his first 3 years. Shot 34.5% as a freshman, 30.8% as a sophomore, 32.3% as a junior, 38% from the three-point line as a senior. Here's other proof. When you talk about shooting stroke, one of the best indicators of how someone's stroke is their free throw line shooting. Usually if someone has a great three-point shooting stroke and they're mediocre from the free throw line, doesn't usually work out that well like that. They're probably going to be an inconsistent shooter. 76% from the free throw line as a freshman, 77% as a sophomore, 75% as a junior, 87% as a senior. So the free throw shooting went up as well as the three-point shooting. I think maybe, just looking at it, you can see some little small minor mechanical adjustments that he made going into his senior year. But Andrew Nembhard is another point guard. Again, 6'5", big body, 6'6", wingspan, I believe he has. And I've seen, when you talk about comparisons, Grizzlies fans, we're going to take you back with this one. Greivis Vasquez is a guy I've seen as a popular comparison for him just because of the size. Not the quickest guy out there, but has decent quickness for his size, uses his size well, can keep the defense honest as a shooter, gets players involved, takes advantage of mismatches, a la Greivis Vasquez. So you talk about weaknesses, like I said, it's just shooting form. We saw some tweaks, but it's still not an ideal, shooting form. He kind of has like a push release in a way, he isn't, the decent athlete. He's not going to blow you away with explosiveness. We talked about Kennedy Chandler's 40-inch vertical, TyTy Washington's lateral agility, from side to side. He's really explosive in that way. Andrew Nembhard is neither of those things. What he is we talked about pushing the pace, how the Grizzlies push the pace. Andrew Nembhard pushes the pace in a different way. He pushes the pace with the pass ahead. He's one of the best in college basketball in it. You mentioned the 5+ assists per games in 3 seasons because he pushes the pace. I'm going to take you back to this season. How many times did you see Zaire Williams catch alley-oops when the Grizzlies pushed the pace? Andrew Nembhard playing with Zaire Williams. I don't have to say much more. Endless opportunities would be created from a scoring perspective. We got 2 more players to address. But before we get to those 2 players, let's talk about Built Bar, man. I'm a little hungry over here, and there's just not much chocolate better out there than Built Bar for your daily snack. See, the thing about Built Bar is you have so many different options. You got the mint brownie, coconut almond, white chocolates, cookies, and cream. Built Bar prioritizes good taste. Then they do the magic, making it as healthy as it can be. So Built Bars, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. You heard me, real chocolate. They also have the Built Bar Puffs. Go check those out as well. The way you go check it out right now is go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. So that's built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. So the last 2 players we're going to talk about are, pretty different. First one is J.D. Davidson. Played at Alabama. Here's another guy that I got to look at the Allen Iverson Classic in Memphis last year. First thing that stands out about J.D. Davidson is explosive. How fun would it be to see J.D. Davidson coming off the bench after a team has to deal with John Morant? I mean, this kid has bunnies. He can jump. He's explosive with the ball in his hands. And, I mean, there were a lot of – when we saw him dunking the basketball at the Allen Iverson Classic, it was like, sheesh. He might be one of those guys. Those guys that go to college 1 year. The John Wall, Derrick Rose, and, just those speedsters, Russell Westbrook, the guys that go in They run up and down the court, shine with their explosiveness, go to the NBA and do what they got to do. We thought, but he actually kind of had a trying year. His year at Alabama didn't go as well, I think, as not just myself, but as many people thought. I mean, for one, he ended up coming off the bench. Alabama was a really good team for, where they were projected to be a really good team, but I believe they ended up not making the tournament, going something like 19-14. So they made the tournament. They were a first round out. That's what they were. They lost in the first round. And J.D. Davidson wasn't a starter on that team. So here's my thing about him. He's entering the draft after not starting at point guard. Again, this is why this isn't a guy you want to be your immediate backup point guard. This is a guy you want to be your third point guard in an emergency situation. But if you draft J.D. Davidson, you're drafting potential. You're drafting a guy who came off the bench. We just talked about how Andrew Nembhard averaged 5 assists per game, and he started at least 16 games in all 4 of his seasons, was a full-time starter in 3 of those years. J.D. Davidson averaged over 4 assists per game coming off the bench. Off the bench. Now, he played good minutes off the bench, 26 minutes per game. That was almost a starter minutes. But 4.5 assists off the bench, that's a credit to his explosiveness. He also, but the downside of that is the turnovers. Because the thing about explosive players, as we've seen, from time to time over the years, is those players tend to get out of control some. That's the knock. He can play out of control sometimes, and shooting. He just didn't show it as a freshman at Alabama. Personally, I thought he should go back to school, improve as a shooter, get started and get more starting reps, and I thought he'd shine. But, J.D. Davidson, trusting himself, trusting his work, he thinks he's ready for the NBA. We saw last season at Alabama, 30% shooter on 2.5 3-point attempts. 30%, it's not going to do it from college 3-point range. So that's the knock on him. You're knocking the 3 turnovers per game and the 30% shooting from 3-point range. The reason you draft this guy in the second round, the reason we're talking about him as one of these potential Grizzlies targets, we've seen what the Grizzlies developmental system can do. We've seen how DeAnthony Melton came from the Suns as a guy who played a lot of point guard. They push him over to shooting guard, work on some of his shooting mechanics. Inconsistent at times, but very much an improved player. We saw Desmond Banks jump from year 1 to year 2. We've seen Jaren Jackson's projection, just his progress inside, as he's developed to work around just being, the shooting that he entered the league with. We've seen Zaire Williams just in one season, from the first half of the season, from January on, how different he was as a player. The Grizzlies have a developmental system here, and J.D. Davidson is a guy you could see taking advantage of that. You could see him going down, maybe playing with the hustle some, getting some minutes there, and then working his way up as that third point guard if one of the top 2 guys go down. And potentially, if things go well, you get this explosive guy and his jumper gets better. Sky's the limit. He could be one of those guys because there aren't many guys that are going to be able to stand him. He's 6'3". He's jumping out of the gym. I in the second round, you're drafting a lot on either potential or a whole lot of production. There's no in between. You don't want to draft some guy with some mediocre potential and mediocre production. Second round, you're going all in. You're going to draft a guy who had 22 points per game in college. He just has, a lack of athleticism, or he didn't play well against bigger opponents. Or you're drafting a guy who had mediocre production, but you look at the physical traits, it's all there. And that's J.D. Davidson. The physical traits, they're there. They are there. The other point guard that we're going to talk about is a guy a lot of you probably haven't seen yet, and that's Gene Montero. Gene Montero is one of those guys where great athlete. He's agile. I like him as, another guy who you could project into that second round range. He's from the Dominican Republic, played in the overtime league, this past year. So he's an overtime league guy, overtime elite. So if you want to go see Gene Montero, that's where you have to go check him out in the overtime league to check out his numbers, his stats, and all of those good things. But 6'3" guy, you just look at him. What I like about him most is the ball skills, nice handle, change of speeds. A lot of people, even before the season, he was talked about as being one of the top international players coming into this draft. Lived up to it. Good size, good athleticism, good ball handling. But, you know, he has his knocks because we're talking about him as a guy who could go in that second round. Outside shooting is there. And we talked about this. This guy is one of those guys I think he'll be tough to defend because he has outside shooting. He has the ball handling skills. And he has good size at 6'3". The problem with him is a little different. This is the overtime league just did its first season. No one knows what to expect from the overtime league. He's from the Dominican Republic. He played in the overtime league. How will he project going from the overtime league to the NBA? It's kind of the questions, you know, we've seen on a couple prospects in the past. It's like, go back to Jalen Green. Jalen Green just last year, I think a lot of people trusted the fact that we saw, Cade Cunningham coming from the college ranks and the G League, even though the G League was a better, situation, arguably you're going against pros, it's definitely a better situation. But the fact that he was playing in a brand new league brought up on its own questions because his numbers didn't look like collegiate numbers. Cade Cunningham put up collegiate numbers. Jalen Green's numbers weren't as well as his, but he was playing professional talent. How does that matter for Gene Montero? That's the ultimate question, but I think he's a sleeper. This is a late first round potential guy, but I think he could possibly fall into the second round just because those questions will rise. So there you have it. Those are 5 point guards. There are many more. But here on Locked On Grizzlies, we just want to break it down to 5, but that's not it though. We're going to talk about this a lot more. We're going to break down some of these guys that we touched on in this episode. We're going to touch them individually. We're going to talk about more positions. We got to talk about the big men as well. We're going to talk about the centers. We're going to break down different draft profiles like Sean did with Kennedy Chandler. There's a lot more to go. So stay with us on Locked On Grizzlies. We appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure you keep tuning in. Locked On Grizzlies is everywhere you get your podcast. And that's Spotify. That's Google Podcasts. That's Apple Podcasts. Wherever you get your podcast, you're going to find Locked On Grizzlies. But that's not it. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen every day. We appreciate it. But before you go, I want you to check out the Locked On NBA Big Board as well. Because here's the thing with the Locked On NBA Big Board. You see me breaking down all this draft talk. They take it to another level on the Locked On NBA Big Board. The thing about the Locked On NBA Big Board is you got them talking about, mock drafts, player rankings, of course, the big boards, and they go a little bit more in depth. And Grizzlies fans, you should be tuning in because you have 3 picks. So they're talking about 3 different selections for the Grizzlies and why these players and positions fit. Wherever you get your podcast, Locked On NBA Big Board is available. But we appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. We'll see you next time.